Washington's Puyallup River, such a fine breeding ground for Pacific salmon, originates in the glacial waters of Mount Rainier and, gathering cool water from tributaries, runs north and northwest through mountain meadows and forests of cedar, fir, and hemlock before flowing into Puget Sound. The Puyallup Riverbank near the Pacific Highway Bridge in Tacoma is calm now, but in the summer of 1970, it provided the site for one of the most terrifying police raids during the violent fish wars of the 1960s and 70s. Indian fishermen believed they were exercising long-standing rights under treaties with the United States to fish for salmon in their traditional ways. The state officers believed that the fishermen were violating valuable state conservation laws. Whether measured in dollars, recreational enjoyment, or Indian culture, Pacific salmon were a mainstay of the Pacific Northwest. In the summer of 1970, with chaotic conflicts regularly erupting on most of northwestern Washington's rivers, events came to a head. Early in August, to support the fishermen down on the river, hundreds of committed Indian people established an encampment on the banks of the Puyallup River. On August 13, tribal leaders announced that state officers were not welcome and that the tribes themselves would police Indian fishing at the Puyallup encampment. Early September marked the time when the big Chinook, also called king, salmon, the most prized of the Pacific salmon, made their summer run up the full-bodied currents of the Puyallup River to spawn. State police scouted the encampment area by boat early in the morning of September 9. Sure enough, the Chinook were charging up the river and the Indian fishermen were busily working their nets. Indians at the encampment fired 4 warning shots near the police boat. Indian people, their supporters, and curious citizens were streaming into the area. Everyone knew this would be the day. A few hours later, the police, hundreds of them, attacked. Their rifle shots pierced the air and the stench of tear gas hung over the encampment. Ramona Bennett, chairman of the Puyallup tribe and the highest tribal officer at the encampment, lived the violence that day, recalling that the police were all up on the bridge with rifles and we could see their rifles kicking. You could feel the bullets going by. There was nowhere you could go. I was so scared that my legs were stiff. It was like that Frankenstein walk you do when you are absolutely terrified. The police prevailed. They arrested more than 60 people, including 5 children. They confiscated the fishermen's catch, nets, and traditional carved cedar canoes. They dragged the fishermen up the rough, rocky riverbanks, making good use of their fists and billy clubs, and jailed them with bail of up to $3,500. Then they bulldozed the teepees, wood shelters, and fire pits of the summer-long encampment. Almost miraculously, no one was killed or suffered long-term physical injuries. The fish wars were a long time in the making. The Indian treaties of the mid-1850s in the Pacific Northwest had supposedly settled the pressing issue of Indian fishing rights. The arriving settlers coveted the salmon for food and economic opportunity. The tribes were salmon people, and for them the fish were as important as the land. Territorial Governor Isaac Stevens, tough, smart, and bent on acquiring as many acres of Indian land as possible, pushed hard and successfully to locate the tribes on small reservations. Tribal leaders, however, refused to sign off on the land transfers unless the United States agreed to guarantee tribes the right to fish on the homelands that the tribes transferred to the United States.